The price of pretense, a family's unraveling. Even homeless people have more value than you. The words echoed in my head long after they left Lucas's lips. It wasn't just the sting of his voice that made it worse, it was the laughter that followed. Everyone around the table joined in. Mom's nervous chuckle, Ella's quiet confusion, and Lucas's booming laugh filled the air. I didn't argue. I didn't even look up from my plate. I just stood up, paid the check, and left. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Friday night was supposed to be a celebration. But the moment I stepped into the restaurant, I could already feel the tension in the air. Lucas had been bragging all week about the big deal he'd closed, the one that supposedly put him on top of the world. He couldn't wait to tell everyone how much he'd accomplished, how much better he was than all of us. And as always, he wasn't going to let anyone forget it. Mom was already talking about how proud she was of him, how much he reminded her of Dad. Even Ella, too young to understand the weight of it all, was caught in Lucas's orbit, hanging on his every word. As for me, well, I've always been the black sheep. The one who didn't fall in line with the family business. The one who chose a different path. I suppose that's why Lucas couldn't resist making me the punchline of his jokes. Dinner came, and as I was about to dig into my meal, I noticed him. An elderly man sitting outside, shivering slightly in the chilly evening air. His only possession was a cart with a few ragged items, all that he had left. I watched him, wondering how someone could be so alone, and yet so invisible to everyone around him. I knew I could help, even if it was just a small gesture. I signaled the waiter, quietly asking for an extra meal to be packed, soup and a sandwich. The waiter nodded and left. That's when Lucas noticed. Playing the hero again, "Hey, Ben," he sneered, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "You think you're better than us with these little acts of kindness?" I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on the conversation with Ella. She was telling me about her latest art project at school, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to the harshness at the table. I didn't want to acknowledge Lucas's taunt. I was used to it. But I couldn't ignore the discomfort growing in my chest. The discomfort of knowing that no matter how many meals I bought, no matter how many good deeds I did, it would never be enough for Lucas, or anyone else in this family. I continued talking to Ella, pretending I hadn't heard. But then, I heard it again. "You know, it's funny how you always try to prove you're better than everyone else with these charitable acts. Trying to make up for when we were kids, huh? Remember when Dad had to bail out your failed ventures?" I kept my eyes on Ella, but she had gone silent. Her eyes flickered between me and Lucas, sensing the tension. Lucas's wife, Isabella, giggled, already anticipating what Lucas would say next. The waiter returned with my meal to go. I stood up, excusing myself to leave. As I walked past the window, I saw the elderly man. He didn't notice me at first. But when I handed him the food, he smiled, his eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. And just as I was about to turn back inside, I heard Lucas again, his voice cutting through the glass like a knife. "Even homeless people have more value than you. At least they're honest about who they are. You're just pretending you're not the same failure you've always been." The laughter that followed from our table, Mom's nervous laugh, Isabella's shrill cackle, and Lucas's booming laugh, pierced through me. It was as if the sound was drilling into my skull. I walked back inside, sat down, and finished my meal in silence. No one noticed. No one cared. I stepped outside, the door closing behind me with a soft click, and the chill of the evening air hit me immediately. The elderly man was still there, sitting on the bench, his face lined with weariness but his eyes filled with a quiet dignity. He looked up as I approached, and his tired face softened with gratitude. "Here, this is for you," I said, handing him the packed meal. The simple gesture seemed to mean the world to him. His hands trembled slightly as he accepted the food, but his smile was steady, like a quiet testament to the strength he still had left. "Thank you," he murmured. "It's rare to see kindness these days." I nodded, but I could barely speak. Something in the moment felt so pure. And yet, just a few steps away, the opposite was unfolding. As I turned back toward the restaurant, I could already hear the low murmur of conversation through the window. I paused for a moment, wondering if I should go back inside or just walk away. But then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of Lucas's voice, cutting through the quiet of the restaurant like a blade. "You really think a sandwich will make you feel like a better person?" His tone was dripping with mockery, but it wasn't just directed at me. It was aimed at anyone who didn't meet his narrow, selfish idea of success. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words wash over me, but I didn't respond. I just stood there, trying to hold it together. "You're pathetic, Ben," Lucas continued, louder now, as though he couldn't contain his need to belittle me. "You've been pretending for years that you're better than us, better than me. All these little charity acts you do, what do they prove? That you're not a failure?" I felt the heat rise in my chest. The words stung, yes, but it wasn't just his words that hurt, it was the way my family laughed along with him. Isabella's sharp, shrill laugh echoed through the restaurant, followed by my mother's nervous chuckle, trying to mask the discomfort that, deep down, she knew was there. Even Ella, sweet Ella, who had been so excited about her latest art project only moments ago, sat quietly, her eyes flickering between Lucas and me. I couldn't bear the sight of it. But I didn't say a word. I didn't fight back. I just stood there, taking it all in. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left an entire room of journalists in stunned silence, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. I turned and walked back into the restaurant, my legs feeling heavier with each step. As I passed by the table, I caught Lucas's eyes, his self-assured smirk fading as he saw the quiet resolve on my face. But it didn't last long. He quickly resumed his conversation, his words more cutting than ever. The middle of another boast about how well his business was doing, but this time, I couldn't even bring myself to listen. Mom was busy texting someone, probably to ask if everything was okay, but I wasn't sure if she even noticed the shift in the air. Isabella barely looked up from her phone, only muttering a quick "thanks for dinner" before returning to her own world. But then, as if by instinct, Ella jumped up from her seat, her arms outstretched. She hugged me tightly, pressing her small face into my chest, a wordless apology for everything. I held her for a moment, savoring the warmth of her innocence, before gently pulling away. "I need to go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No one responded. No one even seemed to notice as I gathered my things and walked out, leaving them behind. But the one thing I couldn't shake from my mind, the one thing that kept gnawing at me as I walked into the cold night air, was that elderly man. His simple gratitude for a meal, his ability to see value in the smallest of acts, had stood in stark contrast to everything I had just witnessed inside. As I stepped outside, I glanced back once more through the window. The restaurant was quieter now, the laughter fading, but my heart wasn't any lighter. Something was coming. I could feel it. Something bigger than all of us. But what was about to happen would change everything. The next few days felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the image of the elderly man, his gratitude so simple and yet so genuine. It was hard to go back to my normal routine, especially with the way things had gone down at dinner. The laughter, the mocking, Lucas had crossed a line, but it wasn't just about the insults. It was about what they revealed. His cruelty wasn't just aimed at me, it was aimed at everything I believed in, everything I had worked for. I sat in my office late one night, staring at the family business's financial records. The glow of my desk lamp illuminated the scattered papers in front of me, the figures on the spreadsheets dancing mockingly in the light. I had always trusted Lucas to handle the company's finances. After all, he was the heir. The one who had stepped into Dad's shoes, keeping the legacy intact, so I thought. But now, something felt off. The more I looked at the numbers, the more the pattern began to emerge. Small discrepancies at first. Just a few misplaced decimal points here and there. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Lucas had been siphoning money from the company for years, hiding it in offshore accounts. Millions of dollars, funneled through shell companies with names that meant nothing, yet all leading back to one thing: Lucas's personal bank account. It wasn't just greed. It was betrayal. He had been stealing from Dad's legacy, from the company that had kept us all afloat, all while laughing at me like I was the fool. The numbers didn't lie. I leaned back in my chair, running my hands through my hair, trying to process the weight of what I had uncovered. The disbelief was almost suffocating. Lucas had always been arrogant, but I never thought he was capable of something this malicious. I knew he had always resented me for not joining the family business, for forging my own path, but this was something else entirely. I grabbed my phone, dialing the number that had been lingering in my mind since I started this search. Eliza. She had been a former employee at the company, someone who had seen things that the rest of us had missed. She left a few years ago, after raising concerns about Lucas's management, but no one had ever taken her seriously. Until now. Ben, she answered on the second ring, her voice cautious, as if she already knew why I was calling. Eliza, I need your help, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I found something. It's worse than I thought. There was a pause on the other end, then a soft sigh. I knew it, she muttered. I've been following the company's records too, from the outside. You're not imagining it. Lucas has been lying to all of you. I felt a wave of relief rush through me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the only one seeing the truth. But hearing it from her made it real. I've been looking through everything, I continued, my words coming out more urgently now. The offshore accounts, the fake transactions. It's all there. He's been hiding it from the family for years. Eliza, can you confirm something for me? Did Lucas have any involvement with Maxwell Holdings? I asked, recalling the name of one of the shell companies I had uncovered. Her response came quickly. Maxwell? That's his first one. He started it right after Dad passed. I tried to warn everyone, but no one wanted to listen. He was too convincing. Too good at playing the part of the successful heir. But I knew. I saw the discrepancies, Ben. I saw the money being funneled into personal accounts. I could feel my pulse quickening. The pieces were falling into place, one after another. How long has this been going on? At least 5 years. Maybe longer. But Ben, Eliza's voice dropped to a whisper, there's more. This isn't just about money. It's about what he's been doing behind the scenes, manipulating everything. The company's finances, your inheritance, even the board. He's been playing everyone. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The level of deceit, the lengths Lucas had gone to, all for power. I felt a cold rage build inside me, but it wasn't the kind of anger that wanted to lash out. It was a quiet, controlled fury. A determination to fix this. Eliza, I need you to send me everything you have, I said. I'm going to expose him. I'll take it from here. She hesitated, but then I heard her moving papers in the background. I'll send it over tonight. You're doing the right thing, Ben. This can't go on. I ended the call, the weight of the task ahead of me settling over my shoulders. It was no longer about my family's approval or trying to fit into their world. It was about something more important now, stopping Lucas before he destroyed everything. The next morning, I received the files from Eliza. It was everything I needed. The contracts, the account details, the transfer records, clear proof of Lucas's betrayal. I spent the entire day going over the documents, piecing together the extent of his actions. The more I read, the more I realized how deep the deception ran. He had been siphoning millions, all the while pretending to be the responsible leader of the family business. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to confront him with rage. I wasn't going to let him twist the narrative in his favor. I had something much more powerful than anger. I had the truth. And soon, he would have no choice but to face it. I gathered the documents into 3 separate folders, each one a damning piece of evidence. One for the board members, one for the authorities, and one for Mom. It was time to finally show them what their beloved son had been hiding all these years. I was ready. The boardroom was silent as I walked in, my footsteps echoing on the cold marble floors. I had prepared for this moment for days, running through every possible scenario in my mind. But nothing could have prepared me for the weight of what was about to unfold. The long, polished table was already set, the board members murmuring among themselves. Lucas sat at the head, as usual, his posture straight, his usual smug expression in place. Mom sat next to him, her face tense, but her loyalty to him evident in the way she looked at him. Everyone was pretending everything was normal, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension. I placed the 3 folders on the table with a soft thud. The sound seemed to carry, hanging in the air, a silent warning. I could feel their eyes on me, a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Lucas didn't even look up. He was still talking about the company's projected growth, about expansion plans he had already bragged about for weeks. He didn't know it yet, but I was about to dismantle everything he had built on lies. "Let's get started," I said, my voice calm, measured. I looked at the board members, their faces slowly shifting from polite interest to something else. Before we discuss the expansion plans, I think it's important we review some of the recent transactions from the past 3 years. Lucas stiffened at the mention of transactions, but he didn't interrupt. I could see the faintest twitch in his jaw as he noticed the folders in front of me. I opened the first folder, sliding the pages across the table. The silence in the room deepened as the documents made their way to each board member. "This," I continued, "is a record of consulting fees paid to a number of shell companies, all owned by Maxwell Holdings." "These fees?" "They are not for consulting. They're a cover-up." I could feel Lucas's eyes on me now, but I didn't look at him. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of watching me hesitate. The room was already shifting, the board members were scanning the papers, their faces becoming more concerned with every word I said. "Lucas," I said, finally looking up at him, "would you care to explain why the funds meant for employee pensions were redirected to offshore accounts? Why did you set up fake contracts to cover it all?" His face turned pale, but his voice remained steady. "This is absurd, Ben. You're twisting everything. This is nothing but an attack on me." I cut him off. "No, Lucas. What's absurd is how you've been siphoning millions from this company while pretending to be the responsible heir. What's absurd is how you've been destroying our father's legacy with every lie and manipulation." I opened the second folder, pushing the documents forward. The truth was undeniable now. The contracts, the inflated figures, the payments to fictitious companies, everything was there, each piece fitting together like a well-oiled machine. I could feel the room closing in on Lucas, his air of invincibility cracking. "Do you remember this?" I asked, pulling out a specific document. It was a report for a consulting fee for a company Lucas had claimed to have worked with, a company that didn't exist. "Explain this, Lucas. Explain how you've been paying companies that don't even exist. Explain why you've been using our family's wealth to fuel your own personal empire." Lucas opened his mouth to speak, but his words faltered. I could see the panic in his eyes as he realized the extent of what was happening. "You're making a huge mistake," he muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice now. "I didn't do anything wrong. This isn't. It is wrong, Lucas," I said, cutting him off once again. My voice had a hard edge now. "You've stolen from the people who trusted you. You've stolen from your own family. And you've used your position to manipulate everyone into thinking you were some kind of hero. Well, the truth is out now, and there's no running from it." I could see Lucas's confidence crumbling. His shoulders slumped, and the smug smile that had always been so confident on his face was gone. For the first time in years, Lucas was finally facing the consequences of his actions. But it wasn't over. Not yet. I opened the third folder, the one I had prepared for Mom. The one that contained everything I knew would hurt her the most. It was a summary of the pension funds he had drained, the people he had left in financial ruin, all while he bought yachts, vacation houses, and lived in luxury. The truth was right in front of her now, laid bare for everyone to see. Mom didn't say anything at first. She just stared at the documents in front of her, her face ashen, her eyes wide. But I could see the disappointment in her gaze, no longer just for me, but for the son she had always believed in. You did this," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lucas opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He couldn't defend himself anymore. "Mom," I said, my voice soft but firm, "this is who Lucas is. This is who he's been all along. The family business isn't just about making money, it's about trust, integrity. Lucas has destroyed both." The room was silent. The weight of the truth hung heavily in the air, the shock too much for some to bear. I turned back to the board members. "The evidence is clear," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "This is not just a breach of trust, it's criminal. The board needs to take action. Now." Lucas sat there, speechless, his gaze falling to the table as the full weight of what I had just exposed sank in. The room remained quiet for what felt like an eternity, but I could already see the decision being made in their eyes. The board had no choice but to act. It was over. But it wasn't just the company that would change. It was everything. Lucas's carefully built facade had shattered. The mask he'd worn for years had been pulled away. And now, for the first time in his life, he had to face the consequences of his greed. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even looking for vindication. But I had one thing Lucas would never understand. The truth. And in the end, it was the truth that would always prevail. Ben, one of the board members, finally spoke up, his voice heavy with authority. "We'll need to conduct a full audit and remove Lucas from his position immediately." I nodded. The decision had been made. Lucas was done. But even as I sat there, watching him unravel, I didn't feel victorious. No, there was no joy in this. This wasn't about winning, it was about restoring what had been lost. Our family's legacy, our values, our integrity. And now, Lucas had nothing left but the wreckage of everything he had destroyed. The days following the board meeting felt surreal. The decision had been swift and decisive. Lucas was ousted from the company, his name erased from the records like it had never been there. The board moved quickly to appoint me as interim CEO, a position I never asked for, but one I knew I had to take. Not for power, but for the responsibility it carried. The company was mine now, in a way, but it felt more like it was returning to the people who truly deserved it. I called a meeting the next morning. This time, the boardroom felt different. The air was still heavy with the fallout, but there was a quiet sense of relief. The truth was out, the damage was done, but now, the rebuilding could begin. "We need to restructure," I said, addressing the room. "This company is not about one person. It's about the people who make it what it is, our employees. We're going to make this an employee-owned company, where everyone has a stake, where trust and integrity are the foundation, not greed." The board members nodded in agreement, some more reluctantly than others, but I could see the shift. Lucas's shadow was gone. The future was uncertain, but it felt like the right direction. As for Lucas, his life was unraveling. The legal repercussions were immediate and severe. Charges were filed for embezzlement, fraud, and mismanagement. The authorities had already begun their investigation, and the press had gotten wind of the scandal. The stories of his lavish lifestyle, the yacht, the vacation houses, were splashed across the news, all while he had drained the company's resources. I knew what this meant for him. The public humiliation was just the beginning. But there was no joy in it for me. The relief I felt was not a triumphant victory, it was a quiet acknowledgement that justice had been done, and that's where it ended. Mom had stopped calling me. She tried to reach out a few times, but I couldn't bring myself to speak to her. The truth was too much for her to bear. I knew she was heartbroken, watching the son she had believed in fall apart. But I couldn't soften the blow for her. She had to face it, just like the rest of us. But it was Ella I kept thinking about. Despite everything, despite the wreckage Lucas had left behind, she was a bright light in all of this. She didn't deserve the weight of her father's mistakes, and I was determined to make sure she didn't carry that burden. A few days later, I received the good news. Ella had been offered a scholarship to attend one of the best art schools in the country. Her talent was undeniable, and her future was now secured, free from the cloud of her father's wrongdoings. I couldn't help but smile when I saw her at the ceremony, her excitement palpable. She was still a child, innocent and pure, untouched by the darkness that had consumed her father. The world was hers to shape, and I would make sure she had every opportunity to do so. The company was changing, slowly but surely. We had already begun the process of transferring ownership to the employees, creating a more inclusive and transparent structure. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but it was a start. A new beginning. As for Lucas, his world continued to crumble. Isabella had filed for divorce, and the news of his extramarital affair had been exposed, sending his already fractured reputation into free fall. I knew there would be no redemption for him. He had chosen a path of greed and cruelty, and now he would have to live with the consequences. One evening, as I walked into the empty boardroom, I looked at the seat where Lucas had once sat. It felt right. The company was finally on the right path. His seat was empty now, but that was how it was supposed to be. This wasn't just about business, it was about something bigger. It was about values, legacy, and integrity. I glanced at my phone, where Ella had sent me a picture of her latest art project, a simple painting of a man sharing a sandwich with a stranger. It was a quiet, beautiful piece, full of compassion and sincerity. I couldn't help but feel a lump in my throat as I stared at it. Ella's world was still filled with kindness, with love, and with the possibility of a future she could control. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. The story had come full circle. There were no grand celebrations, no loud victories. Just a quiet satisfaction that justice had been done, and a new chapter had begun. One that would be defined by integrity, by the people who deserved it, and by the simple acts of kindness that would shape the future. And that was enough.